recognition that it is unsafe to undertake that surgery, not necessarily always safe. So this brings back in the rate that it was at the previous year. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Chapman, did you wish to speak to it? No? Are there any speakers for or against?
Can I just get clarity? It was $69, that's the standard, and then there's a reduced fee for seniors, is that right?
$5, there's a concession of $5.
So is that, so that would be then $62.20 if it was a, yeah, just
Yeah,
like
which is the previous, I understand is,
64.20,
yeah, which I understand is the previous budget's amount, so we're carrying it forward.
Yeah, I just want to make sure.
Yeah. If there are no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The second mayoral minute, item 4.2, page 5 of the agenda, it reads that the confidential Tuggham Rockwall asset condition and maintenance report considered by the council at its meeting held on 26 April 2018 be made publicly available and no longer be considered confidential. Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Light seconded it.
Just a point of order.
Yes.
Mayor. I mean, I'd have been happy to second it too, but under the standing orders, it doesn't actually require one. Minutes don't require one. But having one won't.
Yeah, just an abundance of caution. I'm bringing in a seconder. I don't think that rules it. Yeah. So seconded, Councillor Light. Thank you, Councillor Lewis. This was a report that was rightly considered confidential and made confidential document while there was while the matter was being investigated. Now that that has come to a conclusion, I think it is a document that no longer requires that status. Councillor Light, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for bringing this to the chamber. We need to just briefly discuss the merits of the wall. There's a long history to this wall, going back to the previous term. And I'll still state in this chamber that the previous Mayor, Gerard O'Connor, and previous CEO, Lisa Desmond, and myself certainly worked hard with the residents, and it was the residents that drove this to protect their private property. Without the number of homes destroyed and lost in the ocean, but not only that, but their actual final tangible asset of their land would have been lost. So as I've said previously, it's a disaster not like most disasters. In fire and flood, you still have your land to rebuild, but in this case, there would be no land. There is elements of our community that have a question about this rock wall, and I'll say that the actual residents that paid for their contribution to the rock wall have been very supportive of it. It is still there. It's going to be there for years to come, and I think certainly it was one of the best initiatives of the previous term. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering whether the CEO or the directors feel that there is anything in that report of a confidential nature that should be redacted before it's released. I'm certainly in favour of releasing it to the maximum, but I think we just should have that formally confirmed.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've reviewed the report that I don't think is not fit for public consumption.
Councillor Chapman.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, I actually support that this does go public. We do on any other beach that we do in the Fraser coast, and I feel it's a public document. It's not talking about the rock wall; it's talking about the maintenance on the rock wall, and I think that that's the main thing that we've got to focus on here, is that the council have taken into into their hands to make sure that this rock wall is maintained and of course, we're going to get wear and tear on these sort of structures with the weather, and for the infrastructure team, I'm happy that they've taken this on board.
Any further speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? All opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item on page 6 is the minutes of the previous meeting.
Because I had it in my notes and I forgot to ask it on Monday, and I've just forgotten to ask it again. In relation to the mayoral minute, the first one, I want to clarify that will be for the 2008, so it'll be retrospective, it won't be from now, or is it a case of the people that have paid their fees, are they going to be charged this rate, or is it for next year?
I tell you, my intention is that it's now.
So including those people who have paid for their dog.
I'll be in credit if they've done that. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The resolution is to amend the fees and charges. The only fees and charges that we have current is if a resident has already paid the next dog over 8 years of age on base set prior to today, arrangements will be made to either refund or provide a credit to those residents. Testing? Yeah, it sounds loud to me. I can talk louder.
Okay, items of the previous meeting we held at Burnham Heads. Were there others?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, just item 13 of the agenda, dealing with that indicates two motions. Page 12, which has got 6 parent motion with 5. The minutes to indicate what became of the stand that the first motion may have been not proceeded with, and was able, the minutes should somehow or other reflect what happened to that first motion.
I think the minutes, either that first motion needs to be deleted because by the mover and their seconder, I think. So there's no need for that first one to. We don't. It's not the practice that we minute that change. Although perhaps, I mean, if I was writing minutes for an organisation, I would write out that and then I'd say this was proposed and seconded. But it's not been our practice to do that. Yeah.
So, thank you, Mr Mayor. So where a motion is put forward and it's amended with the acceptance of the mover and seconder, and there is no substantive change, that amended motion becomes the motion. So it morphs into the motion. So I agree that perhaps it shouldn't be included in there. If it is included, it should be some notation to demonstrate how that motion was dealt with or how that was amended.
I think that'll be the best way to fix it now, and then perhaps we should have a policy on how that's minuted. So between the two, we could have, we're not going to remember, I guess, who proposed the amendments, but it could say to amend it with the consent of the mover and seconder, the motion was amended. Yes. And then that explains what actually happened in the meeting.
I think that's the safest
one. Councillor Sanderson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. I've got a couple of amendments on page 8 and 9 in relation to when I raised the perceived conflicts in relation to the Fraser Coast Sports Precinct. It mentions that I was a Football Queensland Wide Bay committee member, which is correct, but I also raised that I was a past president of Maryborough Football. And then you go down to page 9 and it refers to me in point 6 about a similar perceived conflict, and then refers to Councillor Taylor in section A, which is definitely not correct. Yep.
So if you change that from the nature of Councillor Taylor, if you change that to nature of Councillor Sanderson,
yep.
is it
and also
otherwise
include
correct?
in that one that I was past president, haven't been for probably a year and a half, 2 years now, of Maryborough Football.
So would 6A be correct if you just changed Taylor to Sanderson?
It says I also had played for Granville. I've never played for Granville, yeah. Which is okay, but
So what should that say? He also played for Doonville,
no. Oh, well, I've played for Doonville. I've played for most clubs in my history.
except for Granville.
That's right. Except for Granville.
Except for Granville and Man United. Yeah.
No. No, I have actually.
Okay, so how would you like that to be?
Well, I haven't played for Granville, so therefore I was a patron. That's right. I still am a patron of Granville Football Club, and it does say you're right. I've been a committee member of Football Queensland Wide Bay, which is correct down the bottom. So
perhaps Mr Mayor, delete the words he had played football for the Granville Football Club.
Yep.
And leave the remaining sentence to be he had been
both refer to me as past president,
past president.
of Football Maryborough. Yep.
Marlene, did you get that?
Thank you. Were there any further amendments to the minutes? True and correct?
As amended.
As amended, Councillor Light, is there a seconder? Councillor Everard. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is public participation. CEO will provide a report.
Thank you, Mr Public Participation. There was only one participant today, and that was Mr Graham Woad. Concerns in relation to the new viewing platform on Mary River, and also raised a number of concerns regarding flooding issues generally in the Fraser Coast region.
Thank you. Next item, deputations. There are no deputations. Petitions, are there any?
Mr Mayor, I have a petition. The chief petitioner is Stephen Somerville, and the petition relates to a request to seal the roads, Patterson Road and Corley's Road, and there are 45 signatories on that petition. I'm going to table the petition.
Okay, so you're moving that the
I'll move
petition
that
be
the-
accepted and tabled?
Yes.
Yep. Is there a seconder? Councillor Light, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Are there any further petitions to be tabled? If not, we'll move on to item 9.1, Wide Bay Water and Waste Services Advisory Committee meeting minutes. That's pages 29 to 34. And the recommendation is on page 29 that the minutes of the Wide Bay Water and Waste Services Advisory Committee held on the 7th of August be received and noted. Is there a mover for that?
Yes,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
Mattern, seconded Councillor Everard. Did you wish to speak to it? No? No? Any speakers for or against? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? It's carried unanimously. The next item, the open resolution register on pages 35 to 59. And the recommendation is that the open resolutions register, August 2018 report be received and noted. Is there a mover for that? Yeah, Councillor Everard, is there a seconder? Can I speak to it? No? Thanks. Are there any questions for the officers or speakers for or against? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? It's carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.2.1, expression of interest for the Howard Building, pages 60 to 63. James will move it if he was here. Is there a Councillor Mattern? Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Light. Were there any questions about this? So effective, this is that we call for expressions of interest for lease of the site, is the crux of it? Yep. Yep. Any speakers? No? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.2.2, application for new lease, Lions Club of Maryborough. That's pages 64 to 66. Councillor Truscott's moving the recommendation, which is on 64 to 65. Is there a seconder? Councillor Chapman, did you wish to speak to it? No? No? Any speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is 10.2.3, trial of customer service van. That's pages 67 to 71. Councillor Mattern has the call.
Yes, I'd like to move a resolution to become the resolution. So, part one of the resolution is receive a... Sorry, do I need to do that again? Yep. Part one of the recommendation part one of the motion that I wish to move will read, receive and note the trial results of the mobile customer service van. And part two reads, request the Chief Executive Officer to bring a report to a future council meeting that presents options for providing a more comprehensive mobile service to outlying areas, that considers feedback from the mobile customer service van trial and other community development needs relevant to these areas. And point three, continue to use the mobile customer service van in its current format until council considers the report on options for providing a more comprehensive mobile service van to outlying areas.
Thank you. Councillor Truscott, you indicating you wish to second that? Yes, thank you. Councillor Mattern, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I do. Just very briefly, this trial was put in place. The outcome of the trial was probably not quite what we anticipated, but the purpose of the trial really is to bring connection and a face-to-face relationship between council and our outlying areas. So the continuation of this service recognises the value of our small communities, and that a direct contact and a physical presence is important to that relationship between our small communities and council. It's beneficial to our communities and it is beneficial to council. I had some in the last couple of days some really positive feedback from the communities in that really do appreciate that connection with council. So I would be very grateful if this could continue on their behalf.
Seconder, do you wish to speak to this motion?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Happy to second and support this. Just to echo the statements by Councillor Madden, I think it's an important connection for these outlying areas of the Fraser Coast, and hopefully the service will grow, and hopefully we'll be able to see the inclusion of other services to help perhaps attract more people to it, to see it be viable, and yeah, happy to support this.
Any further speakers? If not, I'll put the amended motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is 10.2.4, the Complaints Management Policy. That's pages 72 to 80. The recommendation is on page 72 that we adopt the Complaints Management Policy as attachment 1 and remove the action item requesting a draft amended Complaints Management Policy which recognises natural justice from the Open Resolution Register. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Mattern. Is there a seconder? Councillor Everard, do you wish to speak to it?
No, I believe it's self-explanatory.
Councillor Everard? Okay, thanks. Are there any speakers for or against or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? All opposed? It's carried 9 to 1. The next item, application for new lease, Harvey Bay Men's Shed, that's pages 81 to 4. Yeah. Is there an amended motion circulated? Is that correct?
I believe that there was
discussion. Yeah. Okay.
I think Chloe has sent the amended
Yeah.
emails, sent an email to councillors with the amendments that are proposed, and there's one for this
Okay.
one.
Is there a mover for that amended motion? You happy to move it, Councillor O'Keefe? Yeah.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move that item 10.2.5, application for new lease Harvey Bay Men's Shed Inc. be held over to a future meeting, subject to consideration of public consultation into the proposed use of Lower Damon Park for the purposes of establishing and operating a model rail facility.
Yeah. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Taylor, do you wish to speak to it further, Councillor O'Keefe? As mover?
Yep. Sorry. Yeah, Mr Mayor, I think it's important that we open... Sorry about that.
That's right.
I think it's important that we open Men's Shed proposal for use of Lower Damon Park to further public consultation due to the fact that Damon Park is used by a number of community stakeholders and is frequently used by thousands of Fraser Coast residents.
Okay. Councillor Taylor is seconder. Do you wish to speak to this? Are there any further speakers or questions? I think, oh yeah, Councillor Chapman, yeah?
I agree on this motion, that I think it should be held over for public consultation, and just see what the proposal is, so everyone can look at it and the community can have their say. And I think it's the right way forward for this council to be doing proper consultation like this.
Thank you. So if there are any further questions or speakers, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item, 10.2.6, public Wi-Fi, pages 85 to 92.
Placing, undertake a trial of temporary public Wi-Fi with pop-up Wi-Fi at community events over the next 12 months. And then it would be adding a 0.5 that the CEO bring a report to a future council meeting that provides an assessment of the trial of temporary public Wi-Fi and recommendations for implementation.
Is there a seconder for that amended motion? Councillor Truscott?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I think it's an important tool that we can add to the Fraser Coast. I think Wi-Fi is something that people can consider or almost have an expectation of these days. everyone carries a phone with them these days, and having access to online is knowledge and on that, so getting the data from that. So I think there's some good possibilities to see how it's received, and hopefully, should this proceed, I look forward to the outcomes of that.
As seconder, was it you? Yep. Any further speakers or questions? Councillor Light.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to support this amendment and this motion. Being overseas recently in Hong Kong, you see that Wi-Fi is available in most of the areas, and particularly even in Singapore. It's something that's becoming as necessary as running water and the air we breathe, nearly, in terms of that information availability, and particularly for the growth of tourism, and particularly the people we're trying to attract everyone. But we need to really focus on this and see this opportunity, because I can see that we can lead the way, particularly for tourism, particularly in the CBDs of Maryborough and Hervey Bay, to give that ability to connect to phones. I remember even 4 or 5 years ago being in Scotland, where in Edinburgh you could connect throughout the streets, and it was certainly a great advantage for that city. So I fully endorse moving forward with this.
Thank you. Any further speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is 10.3.1, SunSmart Council, and that's pages 93 to 101. The recommendation is on page 93 that we endorse the SunSmart policy. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Chapman, seconded Councillor Truscott. Do you wish to speak to this? Yep, thank you. Councillor Truscott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's great that we can take up this initiative and bring a policy to the council about this. I think we have one of the highest rates of skin cancer in the world here in Queensland, and probably everyone in this room knows someone that's been affected by it in some way or form. So I think it's important that we acknowledge this, and especially as we move forward, when we consider any sort of outdoor activities, be it for kids playing in the parks or around in public open spaces. I think it's important that we acknowledge it, and I thank the council for taking this step.
Thank you. Any further speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? It's carried unanimously. The next item is item 12.1, councillor attendance at measurable meetings. That's pages 102 to 105. And the recommendation is on 105. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Maddern. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lewis. Do you wish to speak to this?
Just to put in perspective, we've actually gone to the process of adopting a measurable meeting as that required by the legislation. I'd refer back to my experience in the state parliament, where measurable meetings were recorded in the public arena. I found it very uncomfortable on occasions when I was required to attend to other matters at the direction of the Premier or a minister, and then it showed up on my record as a nil attendance at a measurable meeting. I think it sort of gives you the feeling that you're actually not doing your job properly. So I think it needs to remain as measurable meetings are council meetings and special meetings as called by council, because councillors can be off doing other things that are important and necessary, and don't need to feel intimidated by the fact that they can't necessarily attend a meeting.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to endorse that, I mean, one of the difficulties with expanding the concept of measurable meetings beyond the statutory requirements is what would be deemed a measurable meeting, because of the multiplicity of meetings and the great diversity of them. I think all councillors are attending many meetings every week. It'd be onerous to try to capture them all, but it would be misleading if we only captured some of them, and that's, I'm sure, the point that Councillor Madden's making. And after a fair degree of consultation at the governance round table on this, that was the conclusion we came to. So I endorse the resolution.
Any further speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? All opposed? It's carried unanimously. The next item is in 13, consideration of items placed on the agenda with the consent of the mayor. Councillor Mattern has lodged a motion which we've put in this section, which is supplementary business paper number 3, item 13.1. Would you like to read out the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The motion reads that the council approve the waiving of the scheduled waste disposal charges for used feedstock bags and containers disposed at the Aramara, Howard and Bopple transfer stations to the 30th of June 2019 to assist farmers impacted by the drought conditions.
Seconder, Councillor Chapman seconding it. Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Mattern?
Yes, I would like to speak to this motion. On the news, it's very clear that there are many areas in Queensland and in New South Wales that are severely impacted by drought. Our Fraser Coast Regional Council area at this point in time is not drought declared, but I think we need to recognise that there are who are conditions, others that are. When you have expensive at the moment, it can be ingest materials cause the animals to die. Then go of those things where it can just about be the last straw for some people. I think we need to acknowledge that our farmers are doing it tough in places. This is a small contribution towards helping to assist them in really tough times.
Councillor Chapman is seconder. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I agree with what Councillor Madden's actually stated here, but with farmers too is if it's a cost to get rid of these bags and that, sometimes you'll see they'll just make a pile and decide to dispose of them on their own way of burning them. And we don't want that to go into the environment and that, and I think this is a helpful way the council's saying, let's all do the right thing and we'll help you out. We're not in drought at the moment, but if you look at the stock that is around with winter and there's no goodness in the feed around this region at the moment, the cattle are slipping back and these farmers are having to supplement their feed for their cattle and to keep their stock up. So I will be supporting this motion.
Are there any further speakers or questions? Councillor Taylor.
Clarity, probably for the minutes, and it's a general practice that even if it's a motion at the consent of the mayor, there is reference as to who put the motion on there. This one doesn't actually refer to Councillor Madden in the... normally at the header you'd have Councillor Madden sort the following motion at the consent of the mayor, just for the clarity of public record. Thank you.
Any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is Organisational Performance Report, page 195 to 207. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, that is, yeah. So we've got a lot of supplementary agendas. Somebody... Sorry, according to my run sheet, we got to 16, then 14, then 15, and then we'll be going back to item 6 with 16 in front. So somebody make sure we move get all the motions done. We don't leave one on the table. Yeah, that's what I figured. I'll follow the run sheet rather than... So, Organizational Performance Report, page 195, and that is, we will find it, in supplementary business paper, which also includes roundtable meetings. So that has the recommendation on page 195. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Light, is there a seconder? Councillor Mattern, do you wish to speak to it? Wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I do. I'm just going to note the change in format and pay my thanks and appreciation to the staff for the hard work that they've put into changing the format, making it much more easily readable for both councillors and for the community. I think they've put in a huge amount of work, and we need to acknowledge that amount of work.
Yeah, it does make it much easier to read, yeah. Are there any further speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the motion that the Organisational Performance Report for the period 31 July 2018 be received. All in favour? Any opposed? That's passed unanimously. The next item is in the same supplementary agenda, item 16.1.2, roundtable meetings, page 208 to 216. Councillor Taylor, are you moving this? Yep. Yep. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mattern is seconding it.
Mr Mayor, to move that we need to resolve who the councillors
Oh,
are.
sorry, yeah, we need to, is there somebody, are you able to read that out, the actual motion with the appointeds?
Yeah, well, if I could defer to the director, who has the details of so the officer's recommendation is to dissolve the current council portfolios and adopt the roundtable meetings as an avenue to develop and monitor strategic matters, and adopt the roundtable meeting terms of reference, which is in the attachment 1. And part of that is to appoint councillors to, I guess, the 5, whether we call them pillars or the 5 areas within this, sorry? Yeah, which are the roundtable meetings that they, and I think in point 4 of that, we've changed the word community roundtable to community and culture roundtable. So other than that slight amendment, there are a number of, if the director could read out from point 3 through to point 8 and identify the councillors in question so they can either support or reject it.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Through you, Mr Mayor. The councillors for the Assets and Infrastructure Roundtable, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Madden and Councillor Sanderson. For the Community and Culture Roundtable, Councillor Sanderson, Councillor Lewis, Councillor Hanson. For the Economy Roundtable, Councillor Truscott, Councillor Everard, Councillor O'Keefe. For the Environment Table, Councillor Hanson. For Councillor Madden, Development, Councillor Taylor.
Chapman,
Actually, I thought I was economy.
Chapman down with this one.
I am on
Councillor Chapman for the Planning and Development and Assets and Infrastructure.
The agreement was that councillors would be on the meetings run on a Monday and Tuesday, and in order to make it more equitable, I think two of those groups, it'd be that was my understanding.
But with councillors
Mr.
able
Mayor,
to... Sorry.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'm sort of going to say the same thing as Councillor Madden, that the terms of reference allow any councillor to attend any roundtable group meeting. So there's nothing precluding Councillor Chapman from attending those meetings. The idea of providing at least 3 councillors on each of those committees was to give councillors, to identify those councillors' primary responsibilities to attend those meetings, but additionally other councillors can attend any meeting, any roundtable meeting they wish to.
And I probably just to add to that, these are roundtable discussion groups. They're not meetings that make decisions, so the discussion can be there without...
I mean, I'm an ex officio member of all of them. Turning up at one of them, you have the same powers as one of the appointees anyway. Before we proceed any further, is there a seconder for Councillor Taylor's motion? Councillor Mattern. Okay, did that satisfy your question?
Yes, it does, Mr Mayor. I just thought the economy is a major part of any councillor's role, and that's why would have liked to been on it. But if I can just attend those meetings,
That's right.
and we're all going to get invites to that when those meetings are on, that'd be great.
And I mean, I assume none of them, it's all going to be in the same room, so none of them are going to be scheduled at the same time. So if somebody was so inclined, they could actually attend all of them.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We'll use our best endeavours to ensure that happens.
There's no, yeah, okay.
And I think the other thing to point out is that we're planning on putting all of the data around these meetings, so the meeting notices, the minutes and any reports on a single SharePoint, so that you can access for all of the groups.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson, were you? Yeah.
Yes, Mr Chair, not wanting to cause frustration of the process either, but it's said for me to go on the Assets and Infrastructure Roundtable group. Councillor Light was to be on that before. Are you happy that I stay on there, or
Very much so.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Councillor Lane.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to clarify I'm not on one of the groups, and that's my wish. I'll continue with the allowance of this, the chamber to chair the local disaster management group, which I will do with passion, and with the deputy being Councillor Taylor, and I'll concentrate on that. The reasons for that are confidential. The Mayor is aware of those reasons, and I'll leave it as that.
Any further speakers? I'll just make a quick comment that in the 6 years that many of, and the 2 years that, you know, and Zane is the new one. I should have commented earlier. Welcome, Zane. You know, some of us have been on council for 6 years and some of us for 2 years. You know, we've had the portfolio system. We've identified how we can improve upon that from a governance strategic, a better manner for the community. So I think this is a really positive change for the community. It's come about through a lot of work through the governance committee. Yeah.
Are you giving the mover and seconder an opportunity?
Certainly. I'm just contributing. Yeah. Oh, summing up. No. I'll call upon the mover and seconder to speak. I now call upon Councillor Taylor as the mover. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In my, I did write some notes, and then I gave you your copy of the agenda back, which my notes were written on. So,
Please read.
Can you just tell me what I said? No, you won't be able to read them. But look, from my perspective, I've been involved in the portfolio process since 2012. I enjoyed it, but some of the problems that I saw is that when you have divisional councillors with a portfolio, it becomes very isolating. And from my perspective, if we want to work as a collective, if we want to be a true team that progresses this community forward, we need to spend more time working together. What I like about these groups is that there's a range of different councillors from different areas coming together and having a broad discussion about things that are important and working together. And I think that's really important when you consider where we've been in the last, say, 2 years. I think it's really important, and it's time that we come together and start working as a team, not only as councillors but also with our staff. Those who have been involved in the governance portfolio, we trialled this, and I'm certain there were people in the room when I first sort of flagged the idea, and I think the CEO was one of them, but was a bit reluctant to go down this path for a number of reasons. But what we saw from the governance portfolio work that we did over the last 4 or 5 months was that it was incredibly empowering to see staff members and councillors having an equal voice and feeling as though they're heard. And I think that's what the roundtable does. We searched for a name that would really give an image of what we're trying to achieve, and that's when people come in to a room to meet together. There probably won't be a round table because it's not in the budget, but nonetheless, they'll come together and they'll have an equal voice. Whether you're an executive manager, a director, a CEO, a mayor, or a councillor, everyone's voice is heard. What's even more empowering is that in the membership of that group, the chair will have to be turned over on every third meeting, which then means that no one person owns that portfolio. Every person that round table or that section, everyone is invested equally. From my perspective, that's really important. It's really important that we come together as advocates for our community, regardless of our title, regardless of our position, and that every person has a right to be heard. It doesn't take away from a councillor's democratic right to choose and decide on matters that come to the chamber and to be voted on, which is the proper process. And it does not take away the officer's right to make operational decisions based on their responsibilities and their delegations. What it does do is it starts an open dialogue that is very empowering, and it's great to see councillors taking this bold step, because it's hard to let go of that little bit of power that councillors have for the betterment of the entire council and the community. So I'm very excited about this. This should, all being said, make the front page of the Chronicle. It's that fantastic. It probably won't, but it is. Governance is a very sexy thing to be involved in, and I've really enjoyed the work that Councillor Lewis and Councillor Madden, and I can say on a personal note, I've got to know both of them really well. I've got to know our director better and our CEO it's built really positive relationships in our group, and I'm confident that when you embrace this new structure, that those relationships will only get better. Thank you.
Councillor Madden, a seconder, do you wish to speak?
Look, how can I better the passion of that statement? So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Any further speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is 14.1. That's in the supplementary agenda 2, pages 239 to 241. Councillor request for leave of absence. That's from Councillor Light. And the motion, is there a motion? Yeah, on page 239 that leave of absence be granted. Is there Councillor Chapman? Councillor Lewis seconding it? Do you wish to speak to us? No? No? I'll put the motion then. Yeah, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Yep. Just to be clear, there's no further agenda items before we move into confidential? I don't think I've missed any. Yeah, we'll go into general business. Yeah, sorry, we are in general business now, yes. Yeah, were there any items of general business? Councillor Taylor?
To the CEO, I tried to send you an email to warn you about the question I'm about to ask, so I don't anticipate that you'll answer it straight away, but I'll just... it's a question to the CEO. It's in reference to 3 major developments occurring between Main Street, McIver Street, Dulong Road and Royal Drive. I could name those developments, but I don't think it's... I think you would understand which developments I'm referring to. Can the CEO advise the council as to any issues of sediment control, stormwater drainage, overland flow, and any impact on detention basins in that area? Yeah.
Thank you for the question. I'm glad you anticipated that I wouldn't respond straight away. I'll have to take that on notice, Mr. Mayor, unless the director can answer that question.
No, I don't.
No, I think we'd need to take that on notice. It's quite a detailed question.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Any further? Councillor Light.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a few things just to state in the chamber that, as we know, it's very well publicised that this nation's facing a severe drought and one of the greatest crises and disasters we've probably faced for the last 30 years. So I ask everyone, as many people are, making some contribution to this effort. I know that Council is looking at and will come back to this council in ways that we can maybe organise some type of events or activities to help in that area. The other matter, Mr. Mayor, that I wish to state was that 2 to 3 weeks ago that I attended the Australian-New Zealand Disaster Management Conference in Melbourne with our Director of Infrastructure and also our Disaster Coordination Manager. It was a great 2 days down there. We learnt a lot. Great networking, and Queensland was very well representative with Bundaberg, ourselves, and also Townsville Council. We took back a lot of information and ways that we can improve our methods of disaster management and our plans here. Talking about disaster management, it would be prudent for me to mention about the potential fire threat that we have. It's predicted to be one of the worst fire seasons that we're facing here in Queensland, let alone in the southern states. So for the people that can be impacted with bushfires is to have an action plan. If there's any time for you to do that, it's now. If we don't get sufficient rain in the next couple of weeks or months, we're certainly facing a very, very bad season. Already a number of fires that have happened, and I hate to say this, but we're only, I think, touching the surface in that area. I actually, down in Melbourne, bumped into some people, officers and their inspectors now. I knew them as junior firefighters when I was in New South Wales Fire and Rescue, so they've done very well for themselves, and they were talking about the fire threat down in New South Wales particularly. It's probably the worst they've faced in living memory. So hopefully we can get some rain and we don't face that, but be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Light. Were there any further items for general business? If not, and I think we've covered all the other matters, agenda items, we'll need a motion that we go into confidential Under section 2751H, other business for which a public discussion will be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government or someone else, or enable a person to gain a financial advantage for the purpose of considering 15.1, infrastructure charges, adopted infrastructure charges resolution. 15.2, easement Harvey Bay Airport. And then under section 2751E, contracts proposed to be made by, for the purpose of considering Madsen Road upgrade. And section 2751H, other business for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government or someone else, or enable a person to gain a financial advantage for the purpose of considering the Fraser Coast Heritage Advisory Committee membership appointment. Leasing of Bruce Highway Industrial Estate, request for extension to local special conditions. Item 15.6, low-cost housing. And expressions of interest, 16.2.1, Maryborough Airport. Do we have a mover to go into confidential? Councillor Light, seconded Councillor Truscott. I'll put motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Do we really have to go into... Thank you. We've moved out of confidential. Just to confirm, we went into confidential to consider items 15.1, 15.2, 15.3, 15.4, 15.5, 15.6, and 16.2.1. The first item now to deal with is item 15.1, infrastructure charges, adopted infrastructure charges resolution on page 108. This is moved by Councillor Chapman and seconded by Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Chapman, do you wish to speak to this? No? Councillor O'Keefe? No? Any speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is 15.2 on page 129, easement at the Harvey Bay Airport. This is moved by Councillor Everard, seconded by Councillor Truscott. Do you wish to speak to this? No? Any speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 15.3 is a contract matter, page 134. And this is moved by Councillor Everard, seconded by Councillor Chapman. The motion is on page 134. Do you wish to speak to this? No? No? Any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Page 141, which is item 15.4, the Fraser Coast Heritage Advisory Committee membership appointment. That's moved by Councillor Everard, seconded by Councillor Truscott, regarding the new members. Do you wish to? And this is amended slightly from to include Councillor Lewis and Councillor O'Keefe as the councillor members. Did you wish to speak to this, Councillor Everard? Councillor Truscott? Any further speakers? I've been on this committee for 6 years. It's a very valuable committee, and I tend to still have some involvement in it, recognizing our heritage. And I'm really happy with the members who are appointing. I think they'll do a fantastic job. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 15.5, page 150 to 187, is regarding the leasing of Bruce Highway Industrial Estate, request for extension to conditions. And this is moved by Councillor Mattern, seconded by Councillor Everard. Did you wish to speak to this?
No, I believe the report explains the situation quite clearly.
Thank you. No? Any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 15.6, low-cost housing. I have a perceived conflict on this, so I'll vacate the room for Councillor Everard. Chair.
drinks. Sounds like an anthem. Righto. Councillors, on page 188, ordinary item 15.6 is the low-cost housing. And the officer's recommendation, there are 5 points there on pages 189. We had Councillor Madden was going to move this one, and Councillor Chapman. Is that correct? All those in favour? Oh, I didn't ask if anyone wanted to speak about it. Yep, all good? Good on you, thank you.
Thank you. The last item, as I understand from the agenda, is item 16.2.1, expressions of interest at the Maryborough Airport. And that's in the confidential supplementary. That's moved by Councillor Truscott. Who was the seconder? Councillor Madden. Did you wish to speak to this? And this is amended from the original recommendation. Are there any speakers or questions? This is the motion that has been circulated. Do you want, just for clarity, read out the amendment again? Yeah, just as it, because it's different to, yeah. So just refer, note which ones stay the same, and then read out the amended section.
The first three. That pursuant to the Local Government Regulation 2012, Chapter 6, Sections 236, 1C, IV, 2 and 4, which permits council to dispose of an interest in land, a valuable non-current asset, for land that is used as an airport or for related purposes without inviting tenders or conducting an auction. Council resolves that it is in the public interest to dispose of an interest over part of the land within Maryborough Airport for the purposes of developing the unmanned aerial vehicle UAV industry, and to include a fifth point, new recommendation, that the Chief Executive Officer be delegated authority to conduct further negotiation with the UAV-related parties identified through the expression of interest process advertised in April 2018 to secure these opportunities at the Maryborough Airport under terms and conditions acceptable to Council.
Did you wish to speak to your motion?
I'm really looking forward to this. I think there's some great opportunity, and I look forward to hearing the results of Council's discussions and negotiations with the parties identified.
Thank you. Councillor Mattern, a seconder.
I'll leave it at.
Thank you. Any further speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the amended motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. So I understand that that's the final item on our agenda, unless anyone has any further items, or if I've missed any agenda items. No? I'll close the meeting then. Thank you.
11:30.
Good.